The morning mist clung to the iron gates of Buckingham Palace like a gray curtain. Tourists gathered with cameras ready, waiting for the ceremony they came to see. But on this Tuesday morning in March, something was different. Something was wrong. Guard Thomas Bennett stood at his post, motionless as stone. His red uniform crisp. His bearskin hat tall and proud. His face showed nothing. 23 years old, trained to ignore everything. Trained to be invisible while standing in plain sight. The crowd chattered and laughed. Children pointed. Cameras clicked. Thomas stared ahead, eyes focused on nothing and everything at once. This was his duty, his honor. Then he saw her. A woman in a dark coat moved through the crowd differently than the others. She wasn't taking photos. She wasn't smiling. Her hand stayed buried in her pocket, gripping something. Her eyes darted from guard to guard, scanning, searching. Thomas noticed but didn't move. Couldn't move. That was the rule. The woman stepped closer. Too close. She crossed the barrier line that tourists knew not to cross. Still, Thomas remained frozen. His training held him like invisible chains. "I need to see someone inside," she said, her voice sharp and desperate. "I need to see her now." Thomas said nothing. His eyes stayed forward, the woman's face twisted with frustration. She reached into her pocket. "Before you go further into this story, if you're enjoying this kind of real-life drama, hit that subscribe button. You won't believe what happens next, and we bring you stories like this every single week. I said I need to get inside." Her voice rose now, loud enough that other tourists turned to look. Security cameras swiveled. Other guards remained still, but their awareness sharpened like wolves sensing danger. The woman pulled her hand from her pocket. The crowd gasped. In her fingers, dark and cold, was a small handgun. Screams erupted. People scattered, parents grabbing children, phones dropped to the pavement. But Thomas Bennett did not move. His eyes stayed forward. His breathing stayed calm. "Let me through," the woman shouted, waving the gun toward the palace doors. "I know she's in there. Queen Consort Camilla. She needs to hear what I have to say." The air turned electric. London police were already moving, but they were seconds away. The woman was right there, 3 feet from Thomas, a weapon in her shaking hand. "She ruined everything," the woman continued, her voice cracking with emotion. "She destroyed my family. I need her to know. I need her to face me." Thomas could see her finger near the trigger, could see the tears streaming down her face, could see that this woman was not a hardened criminal, but someone broken, desperate, dangerous because of her pain. The protocol was clear. Do not move. Do not speak. Do not react. Help is coming. But protocols were written by people who sat in offices. People who had never stood 3 feet from a loaded weapon pointed at their chest. The woman stepped even closer. The gun rose slightly. Her hand trembled. "Why won't you move?" She screamed at Thomas. "Why won't any of you move? Are you even real?" Behind the palace walls, alarms were sounding. Inside the private quarters, Camilla was having her morning tea. Unaware that outside her home, a woman with a gun and a grudge was demanding to see her. Unaware that a young guard named Thomas Bennett was making calculations that would change everything. The woman's finger tightened on the trigger. And that's when Thomas did something no one expected. Thomas Bennett's eyes shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. He broke the oldest rule in the Royal Guard handbook. He looked directly at her. Not at the gun. At her eyes, the woman froze. For 20 minutes, she'd been screaming at statues. Now suddenly, one of them was human, was seeing her, was acknowledging that she existed. "Ma'am," Thomas said quietly, his voice steady and calm, "I can see you're hurting." The gun wavered. Her eyes went wide with surprise. "I can't let you through these gates," Thomas continued, still barely moving his lips. "But I can hear you. I'm listening." The woman's face crumpled. The gun lowered an inch. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Nobody understands." Behind her, armed police were forming a perimeter. Snipers had taken position on nearby rooftops. One word from Thomas, One wrong move, and this woman would be taken down by force. He knew it. She probably knew it too. Then help me understand, Thomas said. His heart pounded in his chest, but his voice stayed gentle. Tell me what happened. The crowd had scattered far back now. The plaza was almost empty except for police, guards, and this broken woman with a weapon. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the courtyard. My husband worked for the royal household, she began, her words tumbling out fast and desperate. 10 years. He was loyal, dedicated. He loved his job. Then she complained about him. One complaint. He was dismissed. No hearing? No chance to defend himself? Thomas listened. Really listened. He couldn't find work after that, she continued, tears streaming freely now. The stain of being dismissed from royal service, it followed him everywhere. He fell into depression. Started drinking. Last month her voice broke. She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I'm so sorry, Thomas said, and he meant it. I'm truly sorry for your loss. Sorry doesn't bring him back, she snapped, the gun rising again. Sorry doesn't feed my children. Sorry doesn't erase what she did to us. Inside the palace, Camilla was being moved to a secure location. She'd been briefed on the situation. A disturbed woman, a weapon, a guard engaging in conversation. The security team wanted to end this quickly, forcefully. But Thomas's commanding officer, watching from the security room, held up his hand. Let him work, the commander said quietly. Bennett knows what he's doing, but did he? Thomas had never been trained for this. His training was about standing still, about being decorative, about representing something larger than himself. Not about negotiating with armed, grieving widows in front of international tourists with cameras. You're right, Thomas said. Sorry isn't enough. What happened to your family isn't fair. It isn't right. The woman blinked, surprised again. She'd expected resistance, argument, defense of the royal family, not agreement. But this, Thomas continued, nodding slightly toward the gun, this won't fix it. This will only create more pain, more widows, more children without parents. I don't care anymore, she said, but her voice lacked conviction now. I just wanted someone to listen. Someone to care that we existed, that he existed. I care, Thomas said. I'm listening. And I promise you, your husband's name won't be forgotten. Not by me. The woman's hand shook violently. The gun pointed at the ground now, her arm tired from holding it up. Tears fell onto her coat. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. I just wanted her to know, she whispered. I wanted her to know what she did. She knows now, Thomas said gently. Everyone knows now. Your husband's story will be heard, but you need to put the gun down. You need to go home to your children. They've already lost one parent. Don't make them lose both. For a long moment, nothing happened. The world held its breath. Police tightened their grips on their weapons. Tourists watched from behind barriers, phones recording everything. Then slowly, the woman's fingers opened. The gun clattered to the cobblestones. The moment the gun hit the ground, 6 officers rushed forward. They moved like a tide, surrounding the woman, pulling her arms behind her back, clicking handcuffs around her wrists. She collapsed into their grip like a puppet with cut strings. Thomas finally moved from his post. He walked forward, picked up the gun carefully, and handed it to a senior officer. The weapon was loaded. Safety off. One squeeze away from tragedy. Stand down, Bennett, his commanding officer called out. Well done. Return to your post. But Thomas didn't return to his post. Not yet. He walked to where the woman was being held by police, her face pressed against a patrol car, her body shaking with sobs. What's your name? Thomas asked her gently. She turned her head slightly. Sarah. Sarah Morrison. Sarah, I meant what I said. I won't forget your husband. What was his name? David, she whispered. David James Morrison. Thomas repeated the name quietly, committing it to memory. David James Morrison. I'll remember. The police led her away. The crowd slowly began to return, buzzing with excitement and shock. Cameras had caught everything. Within minutes, the video would be circling the globe. Royal Guard talks down armed woman. Buckingham Palace standoff ends peacefully. Guard breaks protocol, saves lives. Thomas returned to his position. His legs felt weak. His hands wanted to shake, but he forced them still. He'd broken protocol. Spoken during duty. Moved without permission. He could be dismissed for this. Dishonored. It's everything he'd worked for. Gone. But he'd saved a life. It's maybe several lives. His commanding officer approached an hour later, after Thomas was finally relieved from his post. Commander Richard Walsh was a hard man, ex-military, with a face carved from granite and eyes that missed nothing. "Walk with me, Bennett," he said. Thomas's stomach dropped. This was it, the reprimand. Possibly the discharge. They walked through the palace corridors in silence. High ceilings, portraits of queens and kings, centuries of tradition surrounding them. Everything Thomas loved about this place, about this duty, seemed to be slipping away with each step. Commander Walsh stopped at a window overlooking the plaza. "You broke protocol today?" "Yes, sir, I did." "You engaged with a hostile individual, while armed guards were positioning for a tactical response?" "Yes, sir. You could have gotten yourself killed. Could have gotten others killed if the situation escalated." Thomas said nothing. What could he say? It was all true. Commander Walsh turned to face him. "You also showed more courage and intelligence than I've seen in 30 years of service. You read the situation correctly, responded appropriately, saved a life." Thomas blinked, stunned. "Sir, that woman wasn't a terrorist, Bennett. She was a grieving widow who felt invisible. You made her visible. You gave her what she actually needed, which wasn't violence but acknowledgement." Commander Walsh's stern face softened slightly. "That took exceptional judgment." "Thank you, sir, but I still broke protocol exists for good reasons," Walsh interrupted. "But blind adherence to protocol without thought is cowardice dressed as duty. You had the courage to think for yourself when it mattered most." Thomas felt something loosen in his chest. Relief flooded through him. However, Walsh continued, and Thomas's relief vanished. "This incident has created complications. Big complications." Before Thomas could ask what he meant, Walsh's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression changed. "Come with me now." They walked quickly through more corridors, up a grand staircase, past rooms Thomas had never been allowed to enter. His confusion grew with each step. Finally, they stopped outside an ornate door. 2 guards stood at attention. Commander Walsh nodded to them, and they opened the doors. "Guard Bennett," Walsh said formally. "You've been summoned." Thomas stepped through the doorway into a sitting room decorated in cream and gold. Afternoon light streamed through tall windows. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases. And sitting on an elegant sofa, teacup in hand, was Queen Consort Camilla herself. She looked up as Thomas entered, and her expression was impossible to read. Thomas stood frozen in the doorway. His training screamed at him to bow, to retreat, to say nothing unless spoken to. Odd. But his training had already been shattered today. "Guard Bennett," Camilla said, her voice measured and precise. "Please sit down." Thomas glanced at Commander Walsh, who nodded once. Slowly, Thomas moved to the chair across from the Queen Consort. He sat on the edge, back straight, hands on his knees. Camilla studied him for a long moment. "You prevented a tragedy today," she finally said. The entire security team watched it unfold on the monitors. "Your actions were remarkable. Thank you, ma'am." But Camilla continued, setting down her teacup with a soft click. "Your actions have also forced me to confront something deeply uncomfortable." Here it comes, Thomas thought. It's a real reason for this meeting. She's angry that someone blamed her. She's angry that the situation happened at all. But Camilla's next words surprised him. "That woman, Sarah Morrison. She blamed me for her husband's death." "Ma'am, she was grieving. People say things." Camilla raised a hand, stopping him. "The question isn't whether she was right to bring a gun to my gate. She wasn't. The question is whether she was right about what happened to her husband." Thomas remained silent, unsure where this was going. "I have people investigating," Camilla said quietly. "I want to know exactly what happened to David Morrison, why he was dismissed, whether proper procedures were followed, whether—" she paused, choosing her words carefully, "whether I played any role in destroying that man's life." "Ma'am, you can't blame yourself for it, can't I?" Camilla's voice sharpened. I live in a palace, Guard Bennett. I have hundreds of staff. I make complaints, give preferences, express displeasures. And people's lives change because of those words. I've never thought much about it before. Perhaps I should have. The room fell quiet. Outside the window, tourists were returning to the plaza, taking photos again, pretending to make the guards laugh. Life returning to normal, as if nothing had happened. My office has located Sarah Morrison's children, Camilla said, her tone businesslike again. 2 daughters. 8 and 11 years old. They're currently staying with Sarah's sister in Dover. Social services is involved now, of course with their mother arrested. Thomas's heart ached, thinking about those children. First their father, now their mother. I want you to go see them, Camilla said suddenly. Thomas blinked. Ma'am, you promised Sarah Morrison that her husband wouldn't be forgotten. God. You promised his name would be remembered. I'm giving you the opportunity to honor that promise. I don't understand what you're asking me to do. Camilla stood, walking to the window. She gazed out at the palace gates where, hours before, a desperate woman had pointed a gun at one of her guards. I'm asking you to be my eyes and ears, Guard Bennett. Visit those children. Talk to Sarah's family. Learn who David Morrison really was. Then come back and tell me the truth. Not the sanitized version my staff will prepare. The real truth. Why me? Thomas asked. Camilla turned back to face him. 'Cause today you saw a human being when everyone else saw a threat. You listened when you could have simply waited for others to solve the problem with force. You cared. And frankly, because you're not part of the palace machinery. You're not protecting me or the institution. You're just honest. Thomas felt the weight of what she was asking. This wasn't a simple task. It was asking him to investigate the royal household itself, to potentially uncover uncomfortable truths. Well, if I find that someone in your service did wrong, Thomas said carefully, if I find that David Morrison was treated unjustly, then I need to know that, Camilla interrupted firmly. I cannot fix problems I don't acknowledge. And I cannot lead a household that destroys innocent people's lives. Her eyes met his. Will you do this? Thomas thought about Sarah Morrison's face as she dropped the gun. Thought about 2 little girls who'd lost their father and might now lose their mother. Thought about David Morrison, a name he'd promised to remember. Yes, ma'am, I will. Camilla nodded. Commander Walsh will arrange everything. You'll take a week's leave. I'll report directly to me when you return. Thomas stood, bowed, and turned to leave. But at the door, he paused. Ma'am, may I ask why this matters so much to you? Camilla's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across her face. Because I know what it's like to be blamed for everything, Guard Bennett. Oh, I know what it's like to be the villain in someone else's story. Sometimes the blame is deserved. Sometimes it isn't. But either way, the truth matters. Thomas nodded and left the room. In the hallway, Commander Walsh was waiting. Well, Walsh asked. I'm going to Dover, Thomas said. I'm going to find out what really happened to David Morrison. What Thomas didn't know was that the truth he was about to uncover would shake the palace to its foundation. The train to Dover cut through the English countryside under gray skies. Thomas sat by the window, watching towns blur past, thinking about the mission ahead. He'd traded his red uniform for civilian clothes, jeans, and a simple jacket. Without the uniform, he felt exposed. Ordinary. The address led him to a modest terraced house near the Dover docks, paint peeling from the window frames. A small garden struggling against the coastal wind. Thomas knocked, his heart racing. A woman in her 40s answered. Sarah's eyes, but harder edges, lines carved by worry and exhaustion. Yes, Mrs. Patterson. My name is Thomas Bennett. I'm here about your sister, Sarah, and her husband, David. The woman's face closed off immediately. Are you police? Press, because we've said everything. Neither, Thomas interrupted gently. I'm the guard from the palace, the one who spoke to Sarah. Recognition flickered across her face. She'd seen the videos. Everyone had. What do you want? To understand what happened. To honor a promise I made to your sister. Mrs. Patterson stared at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. Come in, then. But you upset my nieces. You leave. The house smelled like tea and old books. Family photos covered the walls, happy memories frozen in time. Thomas saw Sarah and David on their wedding day, young and hopeful, saw the two girls as babies, toddlers, children. In the living room, two girls sat on a worn sofa watching television. They looked up when Thomas entered. The older one, 11-year-old Emma, had her father's dark hair. The younger 8-year-old Lily had Sarah's sharp eyes. "Girls," Mrs. Patterson said gently, "this is Mr. Bennett. He wants to talk about your dad." Emma's expression hardened immediately. Everyone wants to talk about Dad. Nobody wanted to help him when he needed it. The anger in her voice was startling. So much hurt packed into such a young person. Thomas sat down in the armchair across from them. "You're right," he said, "and I'm sorry for that. But I'm here now and I'm listening. Will you tell me about him?" Lily looked at her sister. Emma crossed her arms. "Why should we trust you? You work for them. For the people who killed him." "Emma," Mrs. Patterson warned. "It's okay," Thomas said. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Your mom came to the palace with a gun because she felt invisible, because she felt like nobody cared what happened to your family. I understand that anger. I don't work for them. I work for the truth." Emma's defenses wavered slightly. "Dad was a good man," she said quietly. "He loved his job, loved working at the palace. He'd come home and tell us stories about the paintings, the history, the ceremonies. He was so proud." "What did he do there?" Thomas asked. "He was a curator's assistant," Mrs. Patterson said, sitting down beside her nieces. "Managed part of the royal art collection." "It was his dream job. Then what happened?" Thomas asked, though he suspected he knew. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "He made a mistake. One mistake. He moved a painting without proper documentation. It was found damaged the next day and he got blamed." "Was it his fault?" Thomas asked carefully. "No." Lily burst out, speaking for the first time. "Daddy said someone else moved it after he did. Said there were cameras that would show it, but nobody checked. Nobody cared." Mrs. Patterson put an arm around each girl. David requested a formal review, wanted to see the security footage. But the complaint had come from high up, very high up. They expedited his dismissal. "Who made the complaint?" Thomas asked, though dread was already forming in his stomach. Mrs. Patterson met his eyes. The Queen Consort's office. She'd apparently noticed the painting out of place during a walkthrough. Made a comment about lack of professionalism. That was enough. Thomas felt sick. One comment. One casual observation. A man's life had unraveled. After he was dismissed, Mrs. Patterson continued, David tried to find other work. But being let go from royal service, even for something minor, it's like a black mark. People assumed he'd done something terrible, stolen something, broken trust. No museum would hire him. No gallery would take him. He started drinking, Emma said, her voice hollow. Mum tried to help, but he was so sad, so angry he said he'd given 10 years of his life and been thrown away like garbage. Thomas sat back, processing. This was worse than he'd imagined. David Morrison hadn't been a bad employee. He'd been a casualty of institutional indifference. The night he died, Mrs. Patterson said softly, he'd had too much to drink, drove his car into a tree. The police said it was an accident, but Sarah always wondered if she didn't finish. She didn't need to. The girls were crying now. Thomas felt his own eyes burning. I need to know something, Thomas said. The cameras. The security footage that could have cleared your father. Does anyone know what happened to it? Mrs. Patterson pulled out a folder from a side table. Inside were documents, letters, David's employment records. She handed Thomas a letter. This is the response David received when he requested the footage. Read it. Thomas read. The letter was short, formal, bureaucratic. The security footage from that day had been, unfortunately, corrupted during a routine backup. No investigation possible. Dismissal upheld. Too convenient. Far too convenient. Thomas looked at the two girls, at their aunt, at the photos of a family destroyed. He thought about Camilla's words. I need to know the truth. Well, he was going to uncover it. Every piece. Thomas spent 3 more days in Dover, gathering every document, every email. Every piece of evidence related to David Morrison's case. He interviewed former colleagues who spoke in whispers, afraid to say too much. He found the security company that had managed the palace cameras that year. And slowly, painfully, the truth emerged. The footage hadn't been corrupted. It had been deliberately deleted. When Thomas returned to London, he carried a folder thick with evidence. Commander Walsh met him at the palace gates. "The Queen Consort wants to see you immediately," he said. "She's in her private office." Thomas walked through familiar corridors that now felt different. He knew things now, uncomfortable things. Things that would upset powerful people. Camilla was standing by her desk when he entered. Her face was composed, but he could see tension in her shoulders. "Guard Bennett, tell me what you found." Thomas didn't sit. He stood at attention and delivered his report. He told her about David Morrison, a dedicated employee who'd been dismissed for a mistake he didn't make. He told her about the deleted security footage, about the institutional failure to investigate properly, about a family destroyed by bureaucratic indifference. When he finished, Camilla sat down heavily. For a long moment, she said nothing. "Who deleted the footage?" she finally asked. "A senior member of your household staff," Thomas said carefully. "Name withheld pending formal investigation. But the order came from someone trying to protect you, ma'am. They thought a quick, quiet resolution would prevent any scandal from touching your office." Camilla's face went pale. "They destroyed a man's life to avoid inconvenience to me." "Yes, ma'am." "And the painting, was it David Morrison who damaged it?" Thomas pulled out a photo from his folder. "This is the painting in question the day before the incident. See that corner, that small tear in the canvas? It was already damaged. David didn't cause it. He reported it was trying to get it to restoration when it was moved by someone else. The person who moved it panicked about being blamed. Let David take the fall." Camilla's hands trembled. "Who moved it?" Thomas named a person, a trusted household member. "Someone still employed at the palace." The Queen Consort stood, walked to the window. Outside guards stood at their posts. Tourists took photos. Life continued, normal and oblivious. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "That's your decision, ma'am. But 2 little girls in Dover deserve to know their father wasn't a failure. Sarah Morrison deserves to know her husband's name can be cleared. And David Morrison deserves justice, even if he's not here to receive it." Camilla turned back to face him. "You're right, all of it. But you understand what this means? Public acknowledgement of this failure will be embarrassing, damaging. It will be used against me, against the institution." "Yes, ma'am. And you think I should do it anyway?" Thomas met her eyes. "I think you already know what needs to be done. That's why you sent me." For the first time since he'd entered, Camilla smiled. It was sad, but genuine. "You're quite astute, Guard Bennett." "Yes, I knew what you'd likely find. I just needed someone brave enough to look." Over the next month, things moved quickly. An internal investigation was launched. The household member responsible for deleting the footage was dismissed. The person who'd actually damaged the painting was reassigned. David Morrison's employment record was officially amended, his dismissal overturned posthumously. But Camilla went further. She issued a public statement, taking responsibility for the failures of her household. She didn't hide behind bureaucracy or blame subordinates. She acknowledged that David Morrison had been failed by the system meant to protect all palace employees. The media was brutal at first. The public opinion surprisingly shifted. People respected the honesty, respected the accountability. Sarah Morrison's charges were reduced to misdemeanor trespass, community service instead of prison time. She would be able to return to her daughters. Thomas was called back to Camilla's office one final time. "I want you to deliver this personally," she said, handing him an envelope. Inside was a letter to Emma and Lily Morrison. Written in Camilla's own hand, it was an apology, an acknowledgement of their father's good character and loyal service, and a promise that their family story had changed the palace for the better. There was also a check, a substantial one. It wouldn't bring back their father, but it would pay for their education, secure their future. "Will you take it to them?" Camilla asked. "Of course," Thomas said. "And Guard Bennett," she added, as he turned to leave. "Thank you for being brave enough to break protocol when it mattered." Thomas returned to Dover one last time. Emma and Lily read the letter together, tears streaming down their faces. Not tears of anger anymore, but of something else. Relief, perhaps. Validation. Proof that their father had mattered, Mr. Benetema said. When she finished reading, "You kept your promise. You didn't let them forget." "No," Thomas said softly. "I didn't, and I never will." 6 months later, Thomas Bennet stood at his post at Buckingham Palace, the same red uniform, same tall hat, same training to be still silent and decorative. But he was different now. He understood that sometimes. The bravest thing a person could do was break the rules for the right reasons, was listen when others looked away, was care when it would be easier not to. Tourists snapped photos. His children pointed and giggled. And Thomas Bennet stood at attention, a guardian not just of a building, but of something more important. The truth, compassion, justice for those who had no voice. And in Dover, 2 little girls who'd lost everything were learning to smile again, knowing their father had been a good man, knowing that someone, somewhere, had fought to prove it. That was worth more than any protocol.